Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
HUL versus Facebook, which has been a more memorable professional experience up till now?
Well, I'll have to say HUL because HUL has been 6 years of my
Right.
corporate journey. I started it with HUL, so whatever was the stepping stone, as they call it, was all thanks to HUL.
Right.
All thanks to all the stints I've done there. So it has to be HUL. Also because Facebook's only been 7 months, and I'd say the 7 months have been extremely eventful. So Facebook would still come a fairly close second. I'm hoping it overtakes HUL in that mind space sometime soon. Yeah.
Was it your number one ranked company on campus, HUL?
HUL was, yes, absolutely.
What was it like to get your number one company? Because not a lot of people in the history of B schools and a lot of people who are here, I wish it does not happen, but most of them are not going to get their number one ranked company, right? So what was that like?
So, of course, at that time it was exhilarating. HUL used to come to XLRI, still does, but at that time would only take one person for marketing. Now, for a lot of us who have already gotten into these colleges would know that XLRI traditionally has been an HR campus, right? And therefore, while it's established itself as a general or a business marketing campus over the last, business management campus over the last few years, somewhere HR is still the cream or the lure which most big companies would come there for. So they take a few people for HR, they'd only take one person for marketing. So yeah, to be that one at that time felt amazing, of course. Also because I knew what was in store for me was going to be quite a roller coaster ride from there, because I'd heard about the HUL's management traineeship, or at that time what they called the BLT program. It was exciting from the perspective of what was to come and what I knew of it as well. So yeah, quite amazing at that time.
And what were those 6 years like at HUL? You must have handled a bunch of roles. Did you start with the sales stint?
Yes, so
A little bit on the sales stint then, because what we've noticed in all the sessions that we do is that people don't really want to do sales.
nobody wants to do a sales stint.
Yeah, so,
before getting into a company like HUL, nobody does, of course.
Right. So how do you think the sales stint helped you shape up as a professional? What were some of the experiences that you had? If you could give us anecdotes, tidbits, that will really help.
Sure. So, of course, a lot of interesting stories from the sales stint, but let me start with just saying that if I were to now go back, and at that time when I joined HUL, the first year is the BLT stint, where you do a lot of different smaller stints and projects across verticals. And at that time, if somebody would have asked me, I'd have said, hey, I don't want to do sales. I could just directly do marketing, and that's where I want to be in the long term. So why do anything else in between and waste my time doing it? Having said that, today when I look back, I would not trade it for anything else. And why I say that is because, A, in most of the FMCGs, the sales stint is supposed to do a few things. First and foremost, they say it makes a man out of a boy, and of course a woman out of a girl, just for the sake of being, politically and gender correct here. But that's one thing which you just hear of till you actually go there, and you don't know what it means. But when you go there is when you realize that somebody who's just come out of a B school, is about 21 years old, has a team of 14 people, most of who are people who have maybe kids pretty much your age. A lot of them have experience which is far higher than what you've maybe studied for in your entire life. And therefore just the option and ability and the learning of leading these people, figuring out their motivations, dealing with them every single day, understanding them is one thing which is, I think, possibly the best leadership experience you'd ever have. No other marketing experience gives you that. So that's one. I think the other amazing thing about a sales stint is it gives you perspective. It gives you perspective of how things really happen on the ground, right? And I would have been far lesser of a marketer had I not done my sales stint, because I'd be sitting in a cubicle making some plans which I know would not be looking the same in the store as I'd have planned them to be. And therefore, without any empathy for the person who's eventually going to go sell it last mile,
Right.
I know that those plans would mean pretty much nothing, but would just be beautiful charts on just presentation. So I think that's the second thing, which is that perspective, the understanding of things on ground. That's the second thing it does for you. Three, particularly true for our country, where about 80 to 85% of sales still happen in traditional trade, where what you are dealing with is not a fancy,
Supermarket owner or
pseudo
something like
marketer
that.
on the other side who's also,
English
come from a B school,
educated.
who
Yeah.
talks the same language, who
Yeah.
understands when you say a word in English. I mean, let me give you the contrast of it. My first sales experience was before I actually got my first sales assignment, which was during my leadership trainee stint, where I was asked to go to East UP. Was supposed to be there for about 4 months. The first geography I went to was Gorakhpur. And from there, once every week, I would travel to this other place called Sonauli, which is
The
at the
Nepal
Nepal
border.
border.
Yeah.
And when you go to speak to a distributor in Gorakhpur, and then when you step out, having a little bit of an authority because that's what your role demands of you, and then you have to convince that guy to do something for you where you know that he might be a goon for all you know.
Right.
No stereotyping here. It is a little scary.
Right.
But it's incredible when you do that, and it's incredible when you have done that, and when you go back, to your hotel room at the end of the day, you feel that that's something you would have never done otherwise. So I think from that experience point of view,
After having
especially
done
in India,
that, your marketing plans also have a lot more weight, right?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. They have a lot of, as I said, on-ground understanding of how things will happen. Two, just you telling these people will also become far more convincing, because when you go and tell a salesperson, hey, I've been there, done that, I know how it works, and therefore I've built it for you. There's far more
There's
credibility
empathy,
to
there's
that
credibility,
statement.
hence.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So from sales to digital marketing, and I may be wrong and I don't know enough about HUL, but I would feel that, and even today, HUL continues to do so many digital transformation projects. Was it difficult to get people to shift that? Like, I have seen HUL as a client while I was selling media space to them. And there are TV channels and newspapers in the last decade that have run only because HUL would advertise on them. And from there to bring someone like an HUL who's a hardcore traditional advertising person to convince them to do more of digital marketing and be more aggressive about some of its products on social media. What was that transformation like? What were some of the projects you handled? What were some of the stories you have from that time?
Sure. So within HUL, when I was doing my brand marketing stint, I was working for Brew Coffee. That was the last stint I had there. To be very honest, that was back in 2015. And at that time, digital marketing was as less evolved as it possibly could have been, because there was nothing called digital marketing per se. It was only social media and a little bit of online reputation management, and hate to use that term, but a little bit of trying to go viral. There was
ये कुछ
nothing.
viral बना दो
हाँ,
अभी.
मतलब the brief would not be, hey, I want to use Facebook to reach my audiences to
Viral
ensure
video
that my
बनाना
brand
है.
metrics move, but you would go and say, hey, can you make a video for Mother's Day, because I think my TG really looks at Mother's Day as an important occasion, but that should go viral. And that's all I want, right? So from that, I think Unilever's come a long way, and I say that also because now being on the other side with Facebook, Unilever also happens to be one of my clients.
Correct.
But I think that journey has been particularly made only in the last 2 to 3 years. Before that, it was as nascent as as almost negligible. With Unilever, the best thing is you don't have to tell them to keep up with the market and to keep up with a lot of these new media and the new channels. There are enough people who
It's built into
come
the-
from a similar world,
Right.
who see these things every single day, keep looking out for what's new, and keep sort of jumping onto these opportunities. So in that sense, it's easier with the client like Unilever, because they are pretty much the first ones to catch on to anything new, especially if it makes business sense for them. So I don't think it's that difficult as such. However, I can tell you that right now, with working with the likes of a Unilever now on the other side, it's still a difficult task, particularly not in terms of having them look at Facebook as a media channel, but more, as having them look at Facebook as a place where they can put out these videos and creatives out there. Because when you've worked in a brand management team in an old FMCG for the longest time, there's a little bit of an obsession with making, beautiful 30, 45 second amazing films, which, people should watch and then should go to Cannes and give you a little bit of weight on your CV. Now that is a big paradigm to question, and which is where I think Unilever is also mentally trying to make that shift.
So, how many of you are interested in marketing over here? How many of you are planning to make a career in marketing, at least as of now? Rest of you will figure out over time, but yeah, okay. So, guys, there is, when he's talking about Kans, he's essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially you're saying that a lot of stuff that used to happen in traditional media for the sake of winning an award or someone saying that, वाह क्या ad बनाया है, rather than it being connected to के कितना business उससे generate होगा या how many people are the people going to start spending more time using your product or going to start consuming buying more of your product, people are focusing on कि मुझे awards मिलेगा कि नहीं, and that transition happens with a social media platform where you can measure each of these results. So then when you, and now through this I come to the Facebook journey. So from a company that is slowly moving towards digital marketing to the home of digital marketing in so many ways, in 50% of the ways anyway, because there's another behemoth there. But how was that transition like? What was Facebook like? And how does Facebook look at digital marketing? Because that's bread and butter for them. So
Sure. So honestly, it wasn't a direct jump for me from Unilever to Facebook, right?
Correct.
Because I also worked in Tribo in between. So just for perspective, end of 2015, I decided to move out of Unilever to lead brand marketing for Tribo. Tribo at that time was, of course, a relatively smaller brand. We had just got
a funded
Series A.
startup.
Yeah, it was a funded startup, thankfully, because it pretty much started with the funding. The Series A came in pretty much in the first month of the operations, and hence it was an okay, safe jump from a startup point of view in that sense. But when you're working with a startup and when you have the liberty to question the way marketing is done, 2, when you're constrained because there's only that much money to spend, and 3, you know that your industry also has a lot of digital marketing play just from the pure play sales perspective, you start to therefore question the same old traditional channels which you otherwise would use, right? We did not do TV for the longest time because we could not afford to do TV for the longest time. We did not, in fact, do our first TV ad till we got our Series B funding, and Series C was on the cards. We flirted a little with a few other traditional channels, but only put money in select geographies because that's all the money we had. So at that time, you're forced to evaluate some of these channels which you would have otherwise not thought of, because
Right.
that's not how you think of, at least when you start from the first.
When you
principles
enter
in Unilever.
marketing, you want massive budgets, right? You're
Exactly.
like, give me 100 crores, I'm going to
Yeah.
make so many films and I'm going to run so many campaigns. right?
Exactly. And the bigger decisions when you're working with a giant like Unilever, especially at the start of marketing careers, is not how I'd plan my media from scratch, because it's a brand which has been there for 30 years, 40 years in most cases. And therefore, there's a certain way in which the marketing has happened all through this time. So you'd pretty much be looking at how to optimize your money instead of taking tougher decisions and saying, hey, I'll pull money out of this channel, put it in the other. Thankfully, that's the liberty you get with a startup, and that's what happened with Tribo. So I got a little bit of a flavor of this whole digital marketing landscape before joining Facebook itself. And to be honest, I quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed the fact that there is a play thanks to certain growth which social media has seen, a certain growth with other digital video platforms have seen, and now thanks to a lot of OTT platforms also pretty much joining the bandwagon. And that's almost forcing some of the traditional marketing thinking to sort of look at it in another light. I think that made it easy. Of course, then I also realized that would be amazing if I learn more of it and sort of become an expert in this, because I already understand media marketing from one side. Let me look at it from the absolute other side, and which is where Facebook, of course, featured in that list of me wanting to desperately join it. I don't know if you know, but I left Tribo, took a break for 6 months to travel the world.
Okay.
And I very consciously decided, because I'm into travel photography, and I very consciously decided I'll just go and do that. And only then, once I've gotten some perspective, come back and think about what I want to join. So when I came back, of course, Facebook featured right up there in the list for a lot of reasons, for a kind of career tenure, trajectory which I wanted to have, and also from a perspective of the culture of the company, which I'd heard enough and more about. So that made the decision easy. I applied, thankfully things happened, and yeah.